Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS in.form. We have our special guest who comes in on Fridays during the legislative sessions, and that is State Senator Mark Messmer representing District 48. Senator, welcome to the show.
Great to be here again. It's always good to be home on Fridays, and it's always good to be here with you on Channel 18 News.
Well, we do know that this is the day that you catch up on your real work that you do, your living. So we appreciate you taking the time to come in.
Well, fortunately for me, it's only about a 1-minute drive up the hill to get here.
We're neighbors. Well, Senator, let's talk about, first of all, a bill that you have been working on.
Okay, I've got one bill that passed a couple weeks ago in the Senate, one that passed out of committee last week and is available for final passage Monday, and then 3 more that was individual development accounts, which I think we talked about some last week. This week I had 3 bills passed out of committee. One would be for if you have battery of an adult dependent, somebody who's either mentally or physically handicapped, and you're responsible, you're either their guardian or you're their care worker who's assigned to take care of them. Battery of an adult dependent that is either physically or mentally handicapped, either by either a neglect charge or a battery charge of that person. We're going to elevate the felony penalties for that to the same category as if that person were under the age of 14. Because if you're a mentally handicapped, I had 2 constituents who had family members that were killed by healthcare workers in group homes, or I think both were in a group home, and the people that were in charge of their care, one by neglect died, and that person was charged, but since the person was an adult, the neglect charge only and that person was found guilty and is going to serve about 3.5 years in prison.
Okay.
If that person would have been under 14, that sentence could have been doubled. So if we're going to put that, I guess, that enhancement of that person being treated the same as if they were under 14. Okay. Passed unanimously out of committee, and that'll be available for amending on the floor Monday, and then final passage either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how the calendar hits. Another bill that passed out of committee this week would require the State Department of Health to allow owners or engineers or architects to file, when you file plans to the state for your state permits, the Division of Building and Fire Services reviews some of them, most of them. The Health Department reviews, maybe 10% of those overall submittals. Currently, you mail your applications in, you send in 3-part paper copies. We're going to require them, and we've been working with them to try to get them to get up to speed the last couple years. Division of Building and Fire Services, you file everything electronically. They have 10 days to decide to review, 20 days to finish it after they've determined that they're going to review it. The Health Department currently takes about an average of 45 to 60 days to do the same thing. We're going to get them to fall within that same time frame of reviewing the project. You'll file it electronically, and it'll electronically go to the department that it needs to go, and within that 30-day window, either through Building and Fire Services or Health Department, it'll be done.
Speeds that up.
Yep, government efficiency, and that's the kind of things that I And I've had several folks who have had horrific delays in getting projects back from the Health Department. The Division of Building and Fire Services is actually averaging, from 2 years ago when it passed that, an 11-day turnaround. So it can be done. Okay. And then the third bill that passed out of committee this week deals with some alcohol regulations, being on the Public Policy Committee for a while. The Alcohol Tobacco Commission wanted some loopholes that to be a packaged liquor store owner in the state, you have to be majority owned by somebody who lives in the state. And we've always looked at it, when you're at the retail sale area of alcohol sales, we want those people to be part of our community, people that live here, work here. And there's some gaps in our wording of how that's done, and that's the primary nexus of that bill. But it also allows, and something we didn't realize was not addressed in code, if you have a convention center or hotel and you have a reception area where you maybe move in a portable bar for a wedding or convention. Currently, that's not specified anywhere in state law, so that a lot of people have done it for a long time, but it's actually not legal to do that. So we're doing a little cleanup on that as well.
Okay. Well, now, what about bills that have been moving through the House that are of particular interest to people?
Probably the biggest bills of interest that we moved this week. In the House and Senate, there's bills moving that address the pseudoephedrine regulation issue. I surveyed that on my pre-session survey, and I've surveyed it in the past. About a 2-to-1 opposition to requiring everybody to get a prescription for all Sudafed sales. But what is moved in the House and the Senate, both in similar type bills coming from out of both health committees this past week, it would require all pseudoephedrine sales to be sold through a pharmacy. You would right now currently no matter where you buy it, you give your driver's license and they track your sales or your purchases. But it would require all purchases to be done at a pharmacy, and it would give the pharmacist the ability, if he thinks you are someone who's if they think you're what they call a smurf, a person who buys pseudoephedrine just to sell on the black market for methamphetamine purchases, they would be able to block that sale. The pharmacist would have the legal authority to stop the sale of the pseudoephedrine product. And if you have a drug felony in your history, you would have to have a prescription to buy it. You could still get it, but you'd have to have a doctor's prescription to buy it if you have a drug felony in your history.
Obviously, I need it right now with the cold that I've had, but I didn't realize that you couldn't just go up to a counter and grab it and go. I guess you can, but they check your driver's license as a checkout.
It's all kept behind the counter, whether you buy it at a convenience store or buy it at a pharmacy or grocery, wherever any place that it sells it, it has to be kept, behind the counter, and you have to give them your driver's license so they can scan you into the system to see if you've, make sure you haven't exceeded your legal, you're allowed to buy, I'll say the equivalent of 2 boxes. You can buy 2 boxes of pseudoephedrine per month. They can be a maximum of 96 tablet, that size. Okay. And you can do that for 8 months out of the year. That's your maximum purchasing ability. And every time they scan your driver's license and they put your purchase amount in it, it tracks it. So, they know how much, no matter where you buy it. So if you've bought too much, too many times a month, or too much per year, it would block the sale.
Okay.
Already. But this would take it away from the convenience store and give it, basically give it to the pharmacist's ability to, if they suspect you're not buying it for medical needs, they could stop it and not be, sued for it.
And it would still be considered over the counter.
Still over the counter.
You don't need a prescription for
Correct.
it, but you would need to go to the pharmacy counter to actually get it. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
And I would expect something of those to make it through the House and Senate. I think that came out of committee unanimously in both health committees, House and Senate this past week.
Because I know at the legislative breakfast last Saturday, a gentleman brought up the fact that 90% of crystal meth comes out of Mexico. It's not even being manufactured here in Indiana.
Right.
So why make the law?
Right.
I guess.
And that's a good point. Even if you made pseudoephedrine products all by prescription only, you're taking 10% of the product, out of the mix, and you would deal with one negative symptom of pseudoephedrine sales and methamphetamine production. They make it in basically 2-liter bottles now. When they say a meth lab, it's not a very involved lab. It's what the small batches that they make. You would reduce the amount that would be manufactured by people for their own consumption.
Okay.
But you would not really address the methamphetamine addiction problem at all.
Right.
So you would clear up one negative side effect of it, but the methamphetamine problem won't be addressed at all by tightening up pseudoephedrine sales for everybody else.
Right.
So that's the resistance of making the whole the wholesale prescription change. 2 states have done that, and they have seen a reduction in the amount of meth labs seizures that the local law enforcement have done, but the methamphetamine problem is still rampant. and prescription drug problems are still rampant, and that is a prescription drug. So
It's unfortunate sometimes, like you outlaw one drug and then they come up with another one. I remember the spice issue a year or two ago.
Oh, sure.
And
that's
you
still
made
an
it illegal to
ongoing-
have these contents, and then all of a sudden they just changed the formula.
They change the chemical formula and bypass it that way. So those things make the access more difficult, but they don't make the use go away.
Now let's talk about the road funding. Where do we stand on those bills?
There's a couple of bills moving through the Senate, and the Senate bills that we're dealing with are more dealing with coming up with appropriations or allowing spending for more short-term needs. We had Senate Bill 67 that passed last week, and that gives $430 million that'll be distributed to local communities and county governments for their use. Be a nice shot in the arm for them, huge shot in the arm for them. And then we've got Senate Bill 333 that would take any excess revenues this year as we get to the end of our fiscal year on June 30th. Any excess revenues, it would instead of right now, any excess revenues, half goes to taxpayer refunds and half goes to pension fund stabilization. Instead of using it for that, it would distribute that for, and that distribution would be roughly now it looks like about $200 million. Some would go to the state, and additional of that would go to locals as well. It moves ahead part of the trust fund that we've got set up for long-term spending. It moves $50 million of that from 2021 fiscal year to 2019, and it allows the state to bond another $240 million of financing for other road projects. So those are all in Senate Bill 333. I would expect 333 will that'll get final passage this week in the Senate, and then House Bill 1001 is things that deal with tax increases, and a taxing policy has to start in the House. So they're working on more long-term funding solutions. And some of the big items in House Bill 1001, as it passed out of the Budget Committee, the Ways and Means Committee last week, were right now we take about 20% of the sales tax from fuel and put it into the road funding, and it would move that ratio up to about 3/4 of the sales tax collected on fuel to road funding. And to offset that expense, that transfer, it would raise the cigarette tax by $1 a pack. So, and I think in with that, then they've also got some additional income tax cuts to help make that one, kind of a revenue neutral shift. We'll see where all that falls out before session's done. But it also has a $100 per vehicle registration fee for electric cars that currently don't
pay anything, I guess, in a way, yeah.
Since they're not buying fuel, and that'll be part of and that had like 3-to-1, 4-to-1 support on pulling in electric cars into the funding mix. That won't be the silver bullet, but if they're not paying anything, getting them into the funding program is pretty important. And so that those dealing with tax issues, it'll go to the floor next week in the House, and then when that comes over, then we may do some adjusting to that on the Senate side. They may do some adjusting to our other two bills that we've got, and then at the end of the session, I'm certain something will be done to address short-term and long-term funding issues.
And then concerning that, if it passes, and likelihood is that it will, and it'll go to the governor's office and he'll sign it.
Right.
When will counties start to see money? Is that
July 1? You would see the distributions
of this year,
yep,
of 2016?
this year.
Okay.
And the local funding bill that we've got, we require them to spend 75% of that distribution on roads. They can spend 25% however they want. They can spend the whole 100% on roads. It either needs to be spent on roads either this year, or they can put it in a rainy day fund for roads. But that distribution would need to be spent for either current or long-term road use for local government.
Thank you once again for coming in.
You're welcome.
And getting us up to date on what's happening with the legislation. Now, we want you to know there's a whole lot more that goes on in the legislation, but these are just some of the highlighted bills.
Yep, that's the big ones for the week.
All right. Thank you very much. Our guest has been State Senator Mark Messmer, District 48. We thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We are local people watching local people.